Welcome to Search Talk Live with search engine optimization and marketing experts Robert O'Haver and Caleb McKelvin, powered by the Robert Palmer family of companies.
Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Search Talk Live. With me today is Caleb McKelvin. Caleb, how's it going?
What's going on, man? How you doing today?
Good, man. If it's your first time tuning into the show, I want to give you a little bit of background on Search Talk Live. What we do here is we talk about digital marketing, SEO, social media, you name it. We talk about everything on the show.
The whole kit and caboodle.
There's no limits as long as it's something to do with marketing.
Yeah.
But today we have a special guest on the show today. My a good friend here, Rand Fishkin. Rand, how's it going?
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah, so we're going to cover a bunch of stuff with you today. We were really excited to have you on, and we're going to talk some geek.
Oh, yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so let's see. Guys, if you have questions, you can call into the show. The number here is 855-722-0006, or you can type your questions. If you're on Blab, you can type your questions off to the side there, and we will run through them with Rand. We're going to be locking the seat so nobody else can get in, but we can answer your questions live. But we're going to go ahead and start off. Caleb, why don't you start with your questions?
Actually, got a lot of interesting ones. One of the first things I kind of want to dive into today is content. I know you write a lot about it, do a lot of Whiteboard Fridays about it and stuff like that. And kind of the one thing I wanted to touch on, I think you've talked about this a little bit, is the term quality content. And it kind of seems like quality content is really no longer cutting it. It seems like that term is kind of devalued. When you're actually creating content, what needs to be the focus? What questions should you be asking yourself before you even put pen to paper and really get things going? Kind of what needs to be the mindset when you are creating and developing new content?
Yeah, the way I think about it is this. Essentially, over the past, especially 5 to 6 years, there's been such a tremendous acceleration rate in the growth of content, and a proliferation in the number of channels and outlets producing content.
Yeah.
And there's also been growth in the baseline quality of content that is produced. I think that today, one of the things that often frustrates us at MOZ as content producers is that a piece of content that we might produce that 5 years ago would have been superb, would have been excellent, would have been read by, a large percent of our followers and fans in the field and would have been amplified by many folks, is barely cutting it. That's sort of the minimum bar today for making it onto the MOZ blog. And that is, that's a pretty insane challenge to be dealing with, right? To basically say that what was superb 5 years ago is barely good enough today. And I think that acceleration rate is only increasing, which means that 5 years from now, things that today are superb might not cut it at all. That can drive a person bananas. I think a lot of content strategists and content marketers, as well as SEOs who rely on content to help boost their rankings and to earn them links and audiences. We are all struggling through this new world of what content is like. And so the reason that I have talked about sort of create good quality content being dead is that bar, I feel like, is the bar from 5 years ago. And the bar today is just significantly higher. As to how you do that, I think that's actually, it's an interesting topic because I think there's an almost innumerable number of ways that you can increase the quality of your content. I don't think it's just write something better. I think it can be make something more visual, make it faster, make it easier to use, make it interactive, make it more empathetic to your audience, tie it to a smaller niche inside your audience, but make it something that group is tremendously passionate about and wants to share and amplify, even if the rest of your audience doesn't care at all about it.
Yeah.
So I think that list is incredibly long. I don't know that I could list them all today, but it's not. I don't think it's one thing anymore.
Yeah. Gotcha. Well, I mean, for like small businesses, maybe sites that are just getting started, and I like you just use the word amplify, and I really like that word. I think, they do create that valuable content, but they might have problems, say, gaining links from it, actually people getting eyes on it, and they can get a little discouraged from it and might get, it's not worth their time. They invested all this into it. What can they really do? Because I feel like people kind of get discouraged with it and kind of say, well, it's not worth it. We're just going to go away from it, which it actually there will be an ROI with it. It's just all about how they amplify it and their strategy for that. For the small sites, for the ones that are actually, they are investing in time, putting that good content out there, kind of where are they falling short and how can they really amplify their content to say, get some of the big publishers out there to notice, some of the big influencers out there to notice?
Yeah, the way I think about it is this. I think, unfortunately, because for such a long time, creating content at all on the web was kind of the barrier, right? Yeah. There were people who didn't create content for the web and people who did. And so for a long time, a lot of marketers, bloggers, speakers, influencers, SEOs, et cetera, we all said, hey, if you want to do well on the web, you need to create good content. And so people went out and created lots of content. And I think there's a lot of small and medium businesses and even enterprises who still feel like that's what they're supposed to do, is they're supposed to create content. And the way I would think about it is this. Don't create content unless you have a great answer to the question, who will help amplify this and why? If you can't answer that question as you're designing the piece of content you're creating, just the title that you're going to give it and what it's going to be about and what that piece of content is going to cover, ask that question. If you have a great answer to that question, if you can say, you know what, I know that if I create this content, Robert and Caleb will mention it on their show, and they have a lot of people who watch it live and a lot of people who watch the recorded version, and that will help me amplify it. So I'm putting them on my list. And that's great. That's one outlet and two people. Now get 10 more. When you have those specific people, I'm not talking about, I think people with dogs will help amplify this because the piece is about dogs and people love their dogs. So of course they'll help me amplify. No, I want names. I want the names of the 10 people who have dogs who, when they read your piece about dogs, are going to go, I need to put that on Facebook.
Yeah.
Right? I need to tweet that. I need to put it, I need to email my friends with that. I need to link to it in my next blog post this week. When you have those 10 folks, then I think you have a piece of content that's worthy of producing. But before you have an answer to that question, I wouldn't even bother, because I don't think that content in and of itself for its own sake, at least when you're a content marketer, is worth producing. Now, look, there's lots of other reasons to produce content that may be personal or cathartic or, those types of things. And for that, you can ignore my advice. But from a content marketing and content strategy perspective, where you're trying to earn an audience, grow that audience, grow the amplification, build brand loyalty, get customers, answer that question.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of content marketers fall into the trap of where, when they're doing their research, they let those articles that they're doing the research on influence the way they write. And I think it needs to be more of a very, your own mind, your in your own writing style and your spin on it. So do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah.
And I think one of the things there too, like a lot of people who think about content, a lot of folks who think about content think about it in this way. They think that content exclusively means written content. Yeah. They think it's a blog post or an article. And I would argue that content can be so much bigger than that. If you're great at photography, maybe photos and visuals are the way to go. If you're a phenomenal illustrator, maybe something in the world of like comics or art could do the job. If you're great at video or you're great on audio podcasts, maybe that's the way you want to go with content. If you have a deep passion for interactive elements, maybe you've learned how to code, maybe you can make some cool interactive graphs, great, do that. Maybe you have a big audience that you can reach who will answer your survey questions. Cool. Produce a survey every month or every quarter about your industry or your niche that lots of people will care about and want to share.
Right.
I think that there's a very, very long list of content opportunities way bigger than written content. And so I think it's wise for those who are doing content to think bigger than a blog post or an article.
Yeah.
what are your thoughts now? You've got the knowledge graph and you've got the related questions boxes now with semantic search. Would you say that content writers should kind of utilize that in part of their overall strategy?
Adding features like being able to take advantage of things like instant answers and schema and all these markup options. I think in the social media realm, that's stuff like Twitter cards. It could even be, you might be thinking about accelerated mobile pages. There's kind of a long laundry list of items that could be in that consideration set for folks to, pump up their content. But I think that is at the very tail end of the tactics you might consider rather than at the front end of the strategy, right? So to me, strategy is like, who's my audience? Who among them do I want to reach? Who are their influencers? That kind of sits in the tactical bucket, right? And the strategic bucket is ahead of that. So before you ever consider, should I do accelerated mobile pages? Should I think about, how do I get a rich snippet? Should I get Twitter cards going? Any of those sorts of things. I think that sits at the tactical end of the content process, and it applies equally to all your content, right? If you figure out one markup option, you can usually apply that to everything that you're doing on your site, content-wise. So I think that that strategic side where you're connecting up your audience and the content you're creating, that's where I feel like people mess up. I see a lot of content that is executed tactically, like checked all the boxes. They've got their Twitter cards, they got their rich snippets, they're doing accelerated mobile pages. The pages are loading super fast. They're nailing it in terms of their titles and their keyword research and keyword targeting. Just everything is sort of technically correct, but the content is just, excuse the expression, boring as shit.
Right?
I'm sorry, how many pieces of content are we bombarded with every day? Just as digital marketers, it's got to be in the thousands.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I'm scrolling through my Twitter feed and I'm clicking on 1 out of 100 pieces of content that I potentially could. Yeah. And then I'm visiting, Hacker News and maybe Reddit and Tech Meme. And, I'm using this new service called Nuzzle that I like a lot, which sort of shows me things that have been shared by lots of my friends across social networks. Great for catching stuff I might have missed. I'm visiting, I have a whole bookmark section, right? I got Growth Hackers and inbound.org and all these things. And, probably at least once every 48 hours, I'm on all of those sites. So being exposed to thousands, if not tens of thousands of pieces of content, and I'm going to tweet 6 of them, 5 of them. So, I think if you want to stand out, right, I think the best way, in my mind, the best way to stand out is, at least in our field, is when I get an email, kind of a personal email, and it says, "Hey, Rand, this piece of content looks like the kind of thing you would share that your audience would love. Check it out. If you don't get back to me, no problem." And look, a lot of the time I get those emails, I hit delete. But some of the time I get those emails, I click, I'm like, this is good. This is something I want to share. And I think that one of the challenges a lot of content creators, content marketers have, SEOs have, is putting themselves in the shoes of people who, have large audiences that they want to share and amplify their pieces, and then saying, would this stand out to that person? Is this actually going to be, the 1 out of thousands of pieces of content that this person would share? That's a challenge, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
But if you can do that, I think even if it takes you a long time to learn that skill, right, and learn that kind of empathy, that's powerful. I think that was the biggest thing for me, right, was being able early in my career. Well, early. The first 4 years I wasn't so good at it, but then I eventually got good at it, right?
Yeah.
Being able to say like, aha, if I make this, people will want it. People will share it. People will amplify it. That will be worthy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that just goes to show you how difficult the job of a content marketer is, really. I mean, the research and the knowledge that you have to have. And I mean, it's almost like, that's why I talk to other people in the industry. It's almost like baseball. You hit 3 out of 10, you're hitting 300, you're making millions of dollars. it's you got to, it's a hit and miss kind of thing. But I mean, the more effort you put into it, the more you really study those influencers and knowing the type of content you need to create, the more success you're going to have. And so,
Caleb, actually, that's a great point, because I feel like a ton of people, I don't know your guys' particular experience with this, but a ton of people who are tasked with doing content, either in their agency or, by their clients or in-house, they have this expectation from their client, from their manager, that each piece of content they produce is supposed to be successful.
Yes.
And so they do some content marketing. They look back at the 10 pieces you produce and they're like, apparently content marketing is not for us. Maybe no one cares about content in our space. Shut it down. That's how an insane person thinks about it.
Right. But some people have that point of view.
I mean, it would be like, someone in the 1600s being like, well, first 10 airplanes we built didn't work, so I'm out of this whole trying to build an airplane game. It's impossible.
Yeah.
Can't do it. No one wants an airplane anyway.
Right.
Yeah, and the same goes for social media, that type of stuff too. I mean,
yeah, totally.
They give it a couple months and, sorry, I'm not making any money.
No, it's just not working. You had a pretty interesting Whiteboard Friday. I don't know if it was last week or a couple of weeks ago, where you talked about demand distribution. And I really like this one, and you don't have to talk a lot about it, but just kind of touch on it. And you had made a quote in there that says they as far as content marketers, blast tactics at distribution curves where they don't make sense. Can you kind of touch on that and really what the demand distribution kind of is? Because I really like the concept.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is just, demand distribution might be just a fancy way of saying how big is your audience, how much content do they consume, and how many different channels are they consuming it from. So, I used to work in a space many, many years ago when I was a consultant that was commercial real estate lending. And there was basically one trade publication that all the commercial real estate brokers read. They read it monthly when that magazine came out. They didn't read anything else. Like they had virtually no other influencers. All the ones I'd ever talked to, that was the only thing that they talked about or cared about. And so anyone who wanted to make a name for themselves had to get into that one publication. Yep. So that demand distribution curve, right, is very shallow and very small.
Right.
And it has one little spike. Compare that to, for example, the world of digital photography. Right. And digital photographers, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of sites that are popular, that has thousands of regular readers each week and each day. And then there's probably a few, a handful, 5, 6, 10 that stand out from the crowd that have millions of monthly views and visits. And I think about that demand curve, not just as it applies to, channels of places we might read, but also about social. Right? How many accounts do people follow? How regular do they read them? I think about that in terms of search volume, right? So how many different terms are people searching for? If you're looking for a Thai restaurant in Seattle, you know what? It's actually a pretty small number of search terms that you're going to use to find Thai restaurants in Seattle. But you know what? If I'm looking, I think we all went off camera.
No, just you.
Just me. Okay. Great. Well, I'll finish this thought and then I'll come right back. So, I think that distribution curve can apply sort of universally. And the idea here would be that you need to put the right tactics toward your content marketing and your amplification efforts, your SEO efforts, your keyword research, your social media efforts, whatever distribution channel you're looking at. Yeah, so you've got these distribution curves, right? You know that in your particular space, maybe there's a very shallow curve and not a lot of people are paying attention to a long tail of people on social or channels online or whatever it is. So don't try and target a bunch of different people. Try and target just the few sources, the few channels, the few social accounts that actually have influence.
Yeah.
That's the basic principle, right? And what I'm saying is a lot of businesses and a lot of content marketers and strategists take this one size fits all approach, right? They hear, hey, I should do X or Y or Z, and they just do that, which is crazy, right?
Yeah.
That's not a great way to go.
Right.
So that's the idea behind that Whiteboard Friday and essentially matching your tactics to your distribution curve.
Yeah. How quickly You don't actually film those on Friday, right?
No. We film them usually Monday, Tuesday, something like that, and then that gives the video folks time to cut them, polish it up.
Kudos. Yeah. I mean, I can speak probably for everybody. We have all learned a ton of stuff just from those whiteboards. And how you come up with so much content is beyond me.
Yes.
We sometimes struggle on this show.
You're right.
It's just trying to go, okay, what are we talking about this week?
This is the nice thing about digital marketing, in my view, right, is that every week there is so much. Like, our industry changes insanely fast. Yes. Thank God we're not in pipe fitting and pipe cleaning.
Right.
Because I feel like we would really struggle to do a podcast in that field.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that kind of leads me into a question I do have for you. I was a teacher for 4 or 5 years before I actually got into digital marketing. And of course, one of the things I took to heart is being a good teacher means that you're never stop being a student. And so I think a lot of people kind of want to know, how do you better your knowledge of the industry, kind of what do you do to stay on top of what's going on? And really, because people know Rand Fishkin, they know Moz, they know everything, but I still feel like you're a student of the industry. Kind of, how do you do that? How do you better your knowledge?
Yeah, I think a few things really help. First off, Moz has got this great customer base and community of thousands of folks, and we get to hear from them all the time. So the Moz Q&A is a huge source of content for me, figuring out what are people struggling with, what are they frustrated with, what are they solving themselves, what's new that's coming up that hasn't come up before, or what old topics that maybe we visited 4 years ago need a refresh today because they've changed. So that's been big. And then I'll be honest, I think I'm a fairly fast reader and a very fast skimmer of content. Yep. And so, I'm looking at right now at my browser, and I've got, Twitter, Hacker News, Facebook, Nuzzle,
and doing an interview.
Pocket, Reddit. Well, these are just, my bookmarks, right? TechBeam, Inbound.org, Metafilter, Growth Hackers. And I'll visit Quora, right? I'll visit these literally once every day or once every 2 days, each one of them, and kind of go through real quick, just, okay, is there anything interesting here? Yes, look, Hacker News wrote something about the marketing world, or, posted something there. Let me go check that out. Was this interesting enough to share? Is it a topic that people are going to care about in our field? Yes, maybe I'll amplify it. Maybe I'll turn it into content. Maybe I'll write some kind of response. Mm-hmm. So I think studying that way helps a lot. And then, of course, we also have things like Mozcast, right, which are our algorithm tracker, and we monitor tens of thousands of keywords and that kind of stuff. So that also helps us say, oh, wow, look, the Twitter partnership that Google has just shot up to 6%. All right, you know what? We probably need to put out some content about how to get your Twitter results into Google search, because that is a huge number. Yeah. Right? 6% of Google searches containing tweets. Holy crap. Yeah. That's mind-blowing.
Right.
Yeah. So I want to start answering some questions that we have in the chat. The first one is from Kristen. Do you use... yeah. Do you know Kristen?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's pretty well known. Do you use Moz content to find great stuff?
Oh, man. The Moz content guys are going to be so mad at me for this answer. So... Moz content is good, but it just launched, right? And it's getting better. I think the strength of Moz content is on the content audit side, where it audits the inventory and kind of shows you all the performance of you versus your competitors and that sort of stuff. I am still using BuzzSumo to find content. And I think one day in the not too far future, Moz content will be as good as BuzzSumo. Yeah. But right now, we're still playing catch up. So. Yeah. You got to be honest about this stuff, otherwise no one trusts you.
Right.
You're like, oh yeah, Moz content, that's the best one out there. Right. Well, it's the best for this one thing, and then for this other thing, it will be.
Yeah.
And give it time.
Now, I'm getting to this question a little late, so I'm not sure of what she's referencing here, but you're so right. What is the first response when someone tells you, oh yeah, we tried that
for a couple of months and it didn't work for us?
Yeah. I think the way to go about that is, it's very hard to answer that question, Laura, after the fact. Where it's much easier is to walk into the conversation when you're first starting a content plan, right, or a content strategy, or you're about to invest in content marketing, to walk in and say, look, it does not work in the type of way that advertising works. We don't just buy ads and then see them perform and they send traffic. Content is a long-term investment. It's like, it's like looking at, me in high school, right, and saying like, okay, in 2 months, we're going to need that guy to be able to deadlift 400 pounds. You're like, well, that human being has no shoulders.
Yeah, right.
So that's going to be really, even now you can see, like, I have this is an extra small t-shirt. I have to wear extra small t-shirts because I was born with no shoulders.
You're right.
It's the curse of my genetic background. But, I think that this is one of those things where a lot of folks look at content and they don't perceive it that way, right? That it's this muscle that has to be flexed and worked out, and that it takes months or even years to get good at the practice. But if you walk into the conversation that way, right, and you can say to your boss, your client, your team, you can say, hey, I want to invest in content, but we have to be willing to get almost no results for 6 months.
Yeah.
We have to be willing to say, you know what, that is our learning curve, is the first 6 months. And the next 6 months, we'll judge whether we're actually improving and getting better and making some progress. But we're not going to put demands on ourselves for that first 6 months, except get better at it.
Yeah.
And that means that after 2 months, if someone says, hey, where's the results from this project? You can say, we talked about this. That's not how content works, right? When you look at the great content creators out there, even someone like... I really like BuzzFeed as an example, because people point to that and they say, oh, Jonah launched BuzzFeed and it was this instant overnight success and da-da-da-da-da. Yeah, but remember how Jonah had been in web publishing for 12 years before that at a bunch of unsuccessful, semi-failed, mediocre content producers, including AOL, which really struggled for a long time on the content side. And then he learned, right? And he learned like, aha, this is how this works. So, you're talking about a dozen years, not an overnight success. I think that those examples are very important to keep in mind. People point to Moz and they say, oh, Moz is this huge success. Yeah, well, go back to 2004 Moz blog posts. Nobody read those. They were pretty bad. They did not have the kind of reach that Moz does today. We were lucky if we ever got 1,000 people to read a blog post, and today an average blog post gets 8 to 10,000 visits.
Right.
So really, it's a long-term play.
All right. Next question is from Paxton Gray. What are your thoughts on the idea of content shock for Mark? Was it Schaefer?
Yeah.
And the idea that the world
will reach a tipping point in terms of there being too much content for us to consume, meaning marketers should stop investing in so much in content.
I think that's what we talked about, at the start of the show, that we're nearly there in many sectors today.
Right.
And so the idea is not produce content, but find a way to stand out. Right now, the goal of a marketer is be signal instead of noise, rather than create content.
Yeah.
And I think that is already true.
Yeah. Do you think kind of smaller sites and smaller businesses have the misconception that you have to have a large budget and a huge team to be effective?
It can happen, although I think that there's starting to be some more savviness around this, where people are identifying very niche content producers and actually, purchasing those niche sites and bringing them into their brand. 538 would be one of the most salient and public examples, but there are many, many others where independent content producers are identified as like, wow, that person gets the zeitgeist of our time and our audience, and we want to capture their voice. How do we bring them into our organization? Moz has done that a number of times. We saw some of the cool stuff that Dr. Pete was doing, and we were like, hey, how about you come join us? Same thing with Russ Jones, right? Who was at Verante and then Angular. I think that's been a powerful way to leverage those folks who start to get it.
Okay. Caleb, you want to take the questions?
Let's see here. We have one from Iden, I believe. Do you think Tabula and Outbrain affects organic ranking?
Definitely not directly. Well, it depends what you're asking. Are you asking, does putting Tabula and Outbrain ads on my site affect ranking, or does putting my content into Tabula so that they have, all these ads for them across the web? The answer to the first one could be yes. If you place ads on your site and they are overwhelming and they are taking up much more of the space and time and energy of your visitors than the content itself, very often you will see Google penalize or push down that stuff. Panda was kind of designed to get that thin content, ad-heavy stuff out of the search results. On the flip side, if you promote your content through Tabula and Outbrain and you are successful with it, meaning that you get lots of clicks and lots of people end up visiting that content, yes, there can be some benefit. But it's a second order benefit. It's not like Google directly measures that. Yeah. What they're measuring is things like through Chrome and through Android, they're looking at engagement on websites and on pieces of content. Obviously, they're looking at amplification like links and shares and that sort of stuff. And so if you get in front of influencers through your Tabula and Outbrain ads, yes, that content may pick up more links. Yes, it may pick up more engagement, and those could be ranking signals that help you.
Yeah. We do have another question. I was kind of interested in this as well. Who are some of the people, the blogs, the companies that are creating content, kind of like we're talking about here, that are kind of setting themselves apart and really changing, how they do things and creating that uniqueness and value?
Yeah. I've been impressed with a few content creators of late. I think one space that's really hot right now is aggregation. And so I mentioned a site called Nuzzle, which is Nuzzel. They're essentially just a content aggregator that comes from your social channels. But I think another really good one is Product Hunt. Another one is Quora, where they're essentially like crowdsourcing this data and then filtering it through either recommendation or voting algorithms. Those feel pretty powerful to me. Obviously, inbound.org that I co-founded with Dharmesh kind of plays off that same principle. Yeah. I really like, in terms of just like raw content creators, I've been super impressed with a company called Maptia, Maptia. I think in the travel space, they have done something really unique with a type of content that many folks thought just wouldn't work. And that is, it's sort of long form essays plus incredible photography, and that site has become a must read for me. It's one of the few email newsletters that I get, and I'm like, ooh, let's see what's in here. I can't wait. So that's been pretty impressive to see.
Very cool.
Okay. And next question, Rand, if you had to rewrite your first ever content at MOZ, what would it be today?
Boy, that's an interesting one. I think, one of the things that you're probably taking away is like I wouldn't have the reach, right, that I have. So I'd have to come up with something that would be pretty remarkable. I think one of the things that I've seen do really well in our space or in adjacent spaces that hasn't been done as much in ours is to take a lot of the fundamental concepts of SEO and turn those into easy to understand visuals and diagrams. And so that might be something where I would spend some real time and invest. I might even hire an illustrator, although I can do some hacky stuff myself, and try and visualize like, hey, here is the visual guide to all things SEO, right? And it's like, you can understand canonicalization in this one picture. You can understand how duplicate content works in this one picture. You can understand how different forms of link measurement work through these 10 illustrations. I think that would probably be the route I go. I also like it because I've seen the rise of visual content platforms like Instagram and Pinterest, and Facebook is becoming so much more visual driven. It's really tough to be successful on Facebook with purely text content now. Even Twitter, the visuals on Twitter tend to do better than text alone. So
you're right.
That's probably where I'd start.
Right.
Yep. And for the listeners, when it comes to keyword research, what would be your advice to content marketers?
Well, So you guys might know I've been working on a keyword research tool with one of the product teams at Moz for the last year.
Yeah.
And so this is an area that I've spent a ton of time and energy in, and actually, I think probably some folks in your audience, thanks to you guys for sending me, your keyword research worksheets and sharing your processes with me. That's really helped us build what I hope is going to be something good. And I think what I've seen is there's a lot of people who still think about keywords in terms of just one metric, and that is volume, right? So they look at AdWords usually, right, most commonly, but sometimes they use Google Search Suggest or Uber Suggest or keywordtool.io or SEMrush or any of these sources that can give you keyword ideas, and then they take those and they look at volume and they sort by the top volume and they go, that one, I'm going after these top phrases, and maybe I'll go after some of these middle terms as well. And I don't think that's enough, right? Like, in order to be successful with your keyword research, the folks that I've seen who are most successful have, I think it's 4 columns, and this is for organic, right? For paid, it's a little different, but right. For organic, they have volume. They look at difficulty. How hard is it going to be to rank for this particular keyword? How what's the page authority, domain authority of like the people in the top 10? They look at opportunity or some form of opportunity, essentially click-through rate opportunity. They say, oh, great, this has a big knowledge graph and an instant answer up top and Google Maps section in the middle and an image search. No one's clicking on result number 1, right? Like maybe the average is 40% for result number 1 if it's 10 blue links, and this is probably like 10%.
Yeah.
So let me bring down the value of this keyword significantly because it's not. The opportunity is much lower. And then they have some measure around importance. And by importance, I mean like importance to them or their business. How directly do they think people will convert from this keyword? How powerful and influential is it to be ranking for this? What's the quality of the traffic that it brings?
And the intent. What is the search
intent. Exactly. The intent behind it. Is it navigational search for a competitor? Because that's going to be really hard to get anything on. Or, is it transactional, like someone's at the end of the buying funnel? We really want to capture them. So those 4 columns and then some sort of, meta score at the end where they're, in their Excel spreadsheet or their Google Doc spreadsheet, they've got all these words, they've got these columns, and then they have this meta score that kind of adds them all up and uses some modifier. And then they can sort by that to say, okay, this is maybe it doesn't have that great a volume, but the difficulty is low. Opportunity looks pretty high, and it's important to our business. So it should outrank this one that has high volume, but is really difficult, low click-through rate opportunity, only semi-important to the business. You know what? That should be prioritized lower. When I see people doing keyword research like that, I saw some of those spreadsheets, those advanced folks doing spreadsheets like that, and I was like, yes, that is what I want to build for everybody. Right. I think everybody should be able to do keyword research in that sophisticated way because that sort of modeling is so smart.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. We got another question from my buddy Emil. Do you think that there's too much hype in SEO in the SEO space? Do you agree with that?
Do I agree there's too much hype? Well, let's see. I think SEOs get pretty excited about very small changes or upcoming types of changes, right? Like I'm still surprised at the number of people I see obsessing about when the next Penguin release is going to come out. And I think, maybe if you have done a bunch of shady link building in the past or you are a shady link seller, maybe the next Penguin update is very important to you. But otherwise, it probably doesn't matter that much. So I think there's some hype, but I would say the SEO space is also filled with skeptics. One of the things that was remarkable to me was, a couple of years ago, we started theorizing, hearing from folks and theorizing publicly that click-through rate and generally speaking, engagement rate that could be measured through Chrome and through Android was used somehow in Google's rankings. Maybe an indirect ranking factor or maybe a ranking factor that's applied on top of or combined with other signals, but seemed like something that was happening. And the amount of people who were like, nope, no way, it's not happening. You got to prove it. And so we did some tests. We proved it, and people were like, the test wasn't perfect enough. You got to do it all these ways. And so we did some more of those. And it wasn't until Google kind of came out and was like, well, yeah, maybe we use some of those engagement signals, and here's some of the ways how. And, Bill Slawski started covering some of the patents on SEO by the sea. And then people who kind of slowly came around to this idea, oh yeah, Google's probably using engagement in some way or fashion. So yes, lots of hype in the SEO world, but also deep skepticism and a lot of people who require substantial proof, which I think is maybe a healthy balance.
So, the other part of that question was, how do you fight that?
How do you fight the hype?
No, how do you fight the naysayers that, SEO is dead? And
well, that, I've heard a lot of people say they don't want to fight it. Like they would love if their competitors all gave up on SEO. So I think it's only really important to fight for those of us who are trying to build a bigger industry, right? People who, for example, like myself, right, have SEO software and need lots of customers to need SEO software. So we have a vested interest, but I think the vast majority, and consultants have an interest, but a lot of people who do SEO have an interest in their competitors not caring about that.
Yeah, and that's really not the client you want anyway.
Right. Yeah, oh God, it is no fun to try and go in and not only do SEO work, but then convince a client or a team or a manager that SEO matters. If they don't deeply believe, go somewhere else, because the SEO space is so incredibly hot right now. The number of jobs available, the growth rate, the pay raises, it's pretty remarkable to see. Folks I know who've been in our industry 3 to 5 years who are getting 6-figure offers, moving from oftentimes moving from an agency to in-house, where the rates are just insane.
And the extreme too. You don't want. What was I going to say? Never mind. Sorry, I was sidetracked. I'm a little under the weather today. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, man. No, that's all right.
Now we know y'all have. I believe MozCon Local is coming up, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
And you'll be speaking at that, which I think is it's an awesome conference. Local SEO is huge. One thing I'm really hands on with. I know you can't go into kind of too depth and too much depth because you will be speaking at that. But can you kind of take a minute to touch on some of the changes that are happening, some big factors in local SEO that we can see, any big changes or ranking factors, anything like that?
I think a couple of the biggest things that obviously the changes to the Google My Business page have been interesting. And it does seem to us like a lot of folks are making a bunch of progress just by getting their Google My Business page correct, right? Just by setting that up right. And, getting all their categories right and their business name and their citation consistency and all that kind of stuff. That being said, we're also seeing a little bit more of a focus, or what feels like more of an element of links in the local ranking algorithm. So years ago, David Mim and Dudley and I would chat, and it'd be like, links don't feel very powerful in local. And that seems like it's changed a little bit. Right. It feels like links actually move the needle, even in just the local and maps results nowadays, where that used to be the case. I think the other big shift is how Google's changed the visuals. Essentially on both mobile and desktop. I don't know. I can't prove that this is the case, but my sense is that the current local kind of app, or the local pack that's in there with the 3 results, I don't think that A, surfaces nearly as many businesses as it used to, and B, I don't think the click-through rate is as high as it used to be for the local results, when they'd show the 7-pack or the 10-pack or even the 5-pack. And so my suspicion is that actually the web results in local are getting a higher percentage of those clicks than they used to. I'm not sure if that's Google sort of intentionally doing that, or whether it's something they plan to change around and they're going to test more different things. I got to say that this latest iteration to me is the ugliest one they've had in years. Like it feels super half-assed to me.
Yeah.
It was a very strange update. I looked and was like, no, well, surely they will fix that in just a few days. that test can't possibly last.
Right.
My God, it's still here. Why is it still here? It's terrible. Like, this makes me want to go to Yelp, you know?
Yeah.
So we'll see how that evolves. I think what's interesting in local for a lot of folks is the mobile and app world, obviously, you know, skyrocketing and on the rise. I think for a lot of local businesses, they're also trying to figure out how citations and which citation sources still are mattering, whether there's a bunch of new ones that Google's taking into consideration and caring about. So yeah, that'll all be stuff we talk about at MozCon Local.
Very cool.
Nice. And Chase is asking a question. What advice would you give to someone who is deeply passionate about SEO and wants to become big in the industry like yourself?
Give us the secret, Rand.
Yeah, I think, you know, the interesting thing is when I started out, and I think this is true in general in an industry, when it's early, you can essentially become an industry leader even by being very broad in your coverage of the topic. But as an industry matures, I think that's much, much harder. And generally speaking, the folks who stand out are those who take on a specific aspect or a niche inside the industry or a very unique subsegment of the field and become, you know, the super expert in that, right? And you can think of many, many people in the digital marketing world who are like that, who are, you know, experts at schema and markup, who are experts at, you know, patent applications and information retrieval science, who are experts at local, who are experts at mobile, who are experts at conversion rate optimization from the search results, or those kinds of things, who are experts at studying SERP patterns and changes, like Dr. Peter we talked about. So that would be probably my suggestion if you are interested in kind of building a name for yourself and a career, and, you know, sharing information about search and about digital marketing is something you're passionate about. I'd pick one of those niches.
I thought you were going to say it's in the water because, like, all the big SEOs are coming from Seattle. I don't know.
Yeah, I always think about it as like
Danny, you know.
Yeah, Danny Sullivan, right? He's California, and he was England before that.
Oh, okay.
And there's Barry Schwartz, right, from Search Engine Roundtable, and I think he's in New York. Yeah, so I feel, you know, Cindy Crum, who's kind of like the biggest person in mobile. She's in Denver. Yeah, so it's pretty spread out. I know the home of SEO, the original home, is Bend, Oregon. That's like where the OGs of search started in like the late 90s.
Gotcha. Well, we're down to about 5 minutes of the show. Get your questions in. You're listening to Search Talk Live. We are on every Tuesday, 3:30 to 4:30 Eastern Standard Time. You can listen to previous shows at searchtalklive.com. You can listen to us on iTunes, Spreaker, SoundCloud. I think that's it, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think you might have covered it all.
And yeah, so let's see. We got another question. How much do you credit your low points for where you are today?
Oh man, I wish.
Rand's his own worst critic
weird.
too, though.
That is definitely true. Let's see. I think that it is valuable to have had those struggles in the past, but I don't know. There's a lot of me that says, you know, I and Moz would be in a much better place today if we hadn't had to go through some of those, you know, foolish mistakes and
but you learn from those.
Yeah. You absolutely. I mean, you learn from them, and hopefully they, they make you tougher for the future. But I think, well, let me put it this way: how about we don't have to have any of those for a little while? Like I would just like 1 or 2 years of smooth sailing. That would be so great. Like I could really use that. It doesn't feel like that. But, yeah. So I think I'll give it some credit for sure.
Yeah. Gotcha.
All right, I'm going to run through the last few questions here. Once you pick your niche to focus on, what would your next step be?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to figure out what your audience is passionate about and what the influencers in that space will pick up and share, and why they pick that stuff up and share it. Because that will tell you your next tactical steps, right? Like, what should you create? How should you format it? Who should you reach out to? But if you don't have the great answers to those questions, that's going to be a really hard process.
Yeah. And what are the 3 key metrics you have to look at every morning?
I look at net ads, I look at churn rate, and I look at free trials.
Free trials. Okay.
Very cool.
Yep. And this is for MOZ's software.
Of course, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
And I would recommend any of you guys to go try out Moz if you haven't tried one of Moz Pro tools. Me and Caleb both
we
use
talk
it every
about
day.
it. We talk about it all the time on the show. So great stuff. You definitely need to go try it out, especially with a free trial. I think you'll be hooked personally. So,
Rand, I want to thank you again for coming on the show.
Yes.
It has been fantastic as always.
we really appreciate it.
We'd like to have you back.
Yeah, it would be my pleasure, guys. This is super fun. I geek out about this stuff all the time, and it's great to have a couple cohorts to share it with.
Yeah, definitely.
And of course, all the great questions from the audience. This blab thing's fun. Hopefully, next time I'm on, maybe the tech will even be a little more solid.
Yes.
It's come a long way. It's gotten a lot better. It's definitely getting better.
Yeah, we enjoy it, but we'll iron it out before the show. Make sure everything's on point.
Yeah,
Sweet.
man. Thanks again.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
Search Talk Live is a presentation of the Robert Palmer family of companies.